Welcome to episode 3, Major Contributors to Environmental Unsustainability. My colleague N. Suresh and myself, Suresh Mony, have great pleasure in presenting this episode. The last episode was presented by our colleagues Hiran Vedam and Mukundan. They talked on climate change and the change of land use. Now, we have divided our discussion into as per the 4 spheres that are commonly known as the hydrosphere, geosphere, atmosphere, and the biosphere. The reason why we did this was, apart from the unbounded beauty of nature, nature has got a lot of structure. It has got systems, it has got its own processes, and that's what bring nature into it, or that's what confer the equilibrium to nature. So the nuances of this, how nature is in equilibrium, can be best understood by categorizing the activities under these 4 spheres. So the climate change was, so what are the connection between these spheres, 4 spheres really? The geosphere, it gets the sunlight and the sun's rays and reflects it back to the atmosphere. The clouds gather, the clouds trigger rain, which falls into the hydrosphere. And the biosphere receives sunlight, gases from the atmosphere, the living medium from the geosphere, and water from the hydrosphere. So that is how these activities are intimately connected. And today we are going to talk about ocean acidification and freshwater use, which is part of the hydrosphere. And we are also talking about the loss of biodiversity, which is part of the biosphere. Now, the adverse effects, in my environmental sustainability, in this context, there are 10 adverse effects that we face today on Earth. 2 of them are not really quantified, the chemical pollution and the atmospheric aerosol loading. The rest of them have been quantified based on research by scientists and engineers. So 5 of them were in some way or the other covered by Dr. Hiran Vedam and Mukundan. And today we are covering the 3 of them in terms of the loss of biodiversity, ocean acidification, and freshwater use. The ocean is everything I want to be: beautiful, mysterious, wild, and free. When you juxtapose acid with it, one visualizes sour taste, burns, foul smell, and the whole beauty evaporates. NS, what really is ocean acidification, and why is it being increasingly talked about?
Greetings to everybody. Ocean acidification happens when the pH level of the ocean water decreases due to CO2 dissolving in water, forming carbonic acid. Well, this has been a phenomena happening through ages, but today we are much bothered about it because the rate at which this ocean acidification is happening is almost 10 times much faster than what was happening 300 million years or has been happening for the past 300 million years. So that is our botheration. As ocean acidification is a direct relation to the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is increasing basically due to human activity, as elaborated in episode number 2 by Dr. Hiran.
Suresh, from what you say, ocean acidification could be as much of an evil as global warming.
Well, all the marine species which basically have shells and skeletons, which is made of calcium carbonate. These species are the one which is going to get affected very badly because of this ocean acidification. The carbonate ion which is required for formation of this building blocks of this species will not be available when the pH level of the ocean goes down. So that is very important for this. So the offspring which is coming up for this species, they will not have the shells and things, and they will not survive in the environment what they are supposed to be. Though, since these species form the bottom line in the food chain, the other species which are dependent on this food chain will all get affected. So this will have a very cascading effect, and which is not good for the complete marine environment at all.
If calcification is affected and the primary food chain is impacted, already without water, yet being in the acidic range, the future appears dark. Would you not say, Ines?
The prediction for the ocean acidification of the future is not looking very good. If you see the pre-industrial levels, it was 8.17, the pH level of the oceans. Currently, we are at 8.06, which is almost 30% more. Going forward at this rate, we are looking at ocean acidification at 2100. It's estimated that it could go up to 7.8. This is the most worrying factor for the marine environment. A study was done in a C2 in Great Barrier Reef for 400 square meters, and they found that if they could alter the CO2 level in the ocean water, dissolved in the ocean water, they could reverse this acidification and enhance the calcification by 7% in that region to pre-industrial level. The same thing when they did it by increasing the acidification in the ocean, they found that the calcification decreased by almost 35%. So this is by to a level which was at 220-50 or current level. So this is where the whole problem is coming into. So it is, if I explain it little differently, in a habitat, if you have a animal which can run at a speed of say 50 to 60 kilometers, it is able to survive in that habitat, because the predator might be running slower than that, or it is the prey what it preys, it will be running slower than that. But suddenly if you introduce this animal or introduce another animal into the habitat which is running at 100 kilometers, this species cannot survive in that habitat. The same thing is happening with the marine environment. The rate at which this adaptation can happen is very slow, but today's acidification rate is so high they cannot adapt. So inadvertently it will lead to the death of these species in the long term.
So in the context of ocean acidification, Suresh, I hear one term called the deadly trio. What really is the significance of this deadly trio?
Well, the rise in temperature of the ocean water, some of the species which are there in the ocean species, they are very sensitive to it. They are getting very stressed out and they are not able to cope up with it. Apart from that, the oxygen level in the ocean water is also, they are losing the oxygen because of the rise in temperature in the ocean water. Combined with ocean acidification, rise of ocean temperature, and loss of oxygen, it is called the deadly trio. The whole three of them are acting as a big problem for the marine environment, marine species living in the oceans.
On a per capita basis, the CO2 emissions in India are low compared to the world. So would I be right in saying that ocean acidification is not as much of a problem in India?
Coral reefs, wherever coral reefs are there, they are getting affected, and Indian Ocean has got a huge lot of coral reefs, and in India also we have coral reefs. Looking back, if you see, the Indian Ocean and the Asia region has contributed 90% of the global marine aquaculture industry in 2016 as per FAO 2018. So there is going to be big impact if this is going to happen, not only in the industry related directly with it, also in tourism related industries.
In one drop of water are found all the secrets of the oceans. So said Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran was a famous poet and author and philosopher. We tend to take all water for granted. But if ocean acidification impacts ocean water, is everything okay with, or everything all right with the fresh water, Suresh?
Well, we see freshwater today, the oceans constitute the complete water source. So 96.5% is the oceans. The freshwater part is 3.5%, out of which it is broken down into partially saline water, which is 0.9%, and purely freshwater is 2.5%. But out of the 2.5% also, what is available to us only is 30%, because almost 70% is glaciers and ice caps, which we don't have access to. Those groundwater and surface water constitute the balance 30%, and surface water constitutes the smallest part of it. So this surface water currently is being used in a very exhaustive manner than what it is available. So if I look at the kind of usage what is happening on the surface water, if you see, the 70% of the surface water is being used for agriculture, and the balance is used for industry and domestic purposes. So this is, and if the civilization is going to go forward on this path of development, I think this stress on the freshwater is going to be much more acute. And we might have to find ways and means how we are going to reduce this particular thing.
If indeed 70% of fresh water is being used by agriculture, and with considering the burgeoning population, 7 billion humans on Earth as it is, and the future for fresh water looks grim, is it not, Suresh?
The freshwater resources on the planet Earth remained undisturbed till man started agrarian way of life 10,000 years ago. He started using the water resources for agriculture and movement of men and material. He also in the process started contaminating their water resources by dumping the waste into them. Contamination of water resources became very acute once the Industrial Revolution started. Today, the freshwater resources, what we have is totally contaminated, and the quality of water is very bad. Now, looking forward to 2050, demand for freshwater is going to increase much rapidly compared to the rise in the population and the growth in the economy, especially in the third world countries. The methods and solutions available today are inadequate to take care of this problem of water scarcity and quality in 2050. Improvement in science and technology for water treatment, water conservation, water management using nature-based solutions is the only way forward which can help us in elevating this water scarcity and water quality problems in 2050. Well, we talked about freshwater, we talked about ocean acidification. Well, one thinks of diversity, one thinks of India with its myriad languages, religions, and cultures. SM, how really it is in the biosphere?
So biodiversity, Suresh, is really the variability of organisms in a physical setting, in an environment. We have diverse organisms in this world. You may have plants, you have trees, you have fungi, animals, mammals, amphibians, lava. So all these are present in the environment. So the smallest, even a human body is really an ecosystem where bacteria are present. We have food, and the human body has got access to sunlight, etc. So in the human body itself is the smallest ecosystem where all these organisms are there. So that this variability in the living organisms is really the biodiversity, and this can be measured. So the biodiversity is measured in terms of richness. How many species are there in a particular area? Suppose you have 10 different species in a habitat, so that is rich by 10 species. Suppose another species, you have only 2 species. The number of animals might be same, but you have 2 cows and 8 deers, so the richness is only 2. So the richness is 5 times more in the first habitat than the second habitat. That is richness. The second thing is what is known as the evenness. It can be measured by evenness in terms of the proportion of species in a particular habitat. So that also is important. And the third thing is heterogeneity. Heterogeneity measures both the richness as well as the evenness. And biodiversity can also be measured across different habitats and different regions. Alpha diversity is the measurement of diversity within a habitat. Beta diversity is the measurement between habitats, and gamma diversity is the measurement across a landscape. When I say across a landscape, it could be a grassland, it could be a temperate grassland, it could be a tropical grassland, it could be a tundra ice region, it could be a forest. So all these are statistically measurable, and it's very important, the statistical measurements. It's just not for the sake of statistics, but the fact that what is the impact of biodiversity or loss of biodiversity on the population, on the world, and how we can improve. So that's what biodiversity in a nutshell is.
While the statistical information is interesting to know, I am a bit perplexed, and I know that flora and fauna have been existed from time immemorial, and a lot of species, including the dinosaurs, have extinct from the planet. Why is loss of biodiversity becoming suddenly important?
I think to explain why loss of biodiversity is important, I think certain stark facts we must look at. During the last 50 years, we have lost 68% of species in the world, right? And when I say species, it means mammals, it means birds, fish, plants, and insects. There's a global biodiversity loss of 70%, a tree cover loss of 50%. And we spend so much of our efforts on agriculture that forest land is getting transformed. We have about 70% biodiversity loss due to conversion of land into agricultural land, and 50% freshwater loss. The percentage of ice land which has been alterated is about 75%. And these are huge numbers, mind you. And this has happened in the last only 50 years. Whereas in India, you find bird species are facing extinction. 3% of our bird species are gone. Then we have lost our honeybee population is getting extinct. And if you look at the extinct flora and fauna, you have about 5 extinct animals ranging from the auroch, the Malabar civet, to the great Indian bustard. Extinct birds, there are about 7 of them, and extinct plants, there are about 12 of them. So all these are really telling us that it is very real, it's very much upon us. We are not able to see the loss of biodiversity unlike a climate change, which is visible, we are not able to see this. I think I must mention here that the humans have come on this earth about 65,000 years ago. And the world has been in existence right from 360 million years ago. So until humans came, the average loss of species was 0.1 per million species year, 0.1 per million species years. Today, the loss is 100 to 1,800 times, depending upon what species, whether it's a plant or an animal or a mammal. So the loss has increased by 100 to 1,800 times in the last few years. And that really explains why loss of biodiversity is so important.
Granted that loss of biodiversity is increasing, but how is it beneficial to the planet? Is there too much hype around it?
The planet is made up of living organisms. We have, I think, 7 billion species, and 7 only the species, and the population of these species is huge. And we have 9 billion human, or 9 million species and about 7 billion human beings. That is the population. Now, if you look, so all the species, living organisms require food, they require energy, and they require nutrients. So food, energy, and nutrients are connected. You eat food, you get energy, and for energy, you require nutrients. And that nature has got a very astounding way of having a natural mechanism. So the only source of inexhaustible energy for the planet is the sun. The sun, and the plants are the only living organisms which can convert the energy from the light energy from the sun to chemical energy. So the plant, we have the chlorophyll in the plants. The plant that converts it into chemical energy, stores the energy, and then releases it. So this process, this forms the base, the fountainhead of energy for all the living organisms, including human beings. So plants are called the primary producers. At the next higher level, you have the herbivores. The herbivores are the primary consumers. They are grass eating or plant eating. They're vegetarian. They may be a rabbit, a mouse, or a cow, or a deer. Above them, you have the primary carnivores who eat the herbivores. Above them, you have the secondary carnivores who eat the primary carnivores. So if you go down at the top level, you may have the predators. The predators could be an eagle or hawk. It could be a polar bear. It could be a lion. It could be a tiger. They're all the predators. So you have this mechanism on the earth where energy is transferred from the plants to the upper level. Now, the interesting thing to be noted is that energy, the transfer is not efficient. If you have 10,000 kilocalories being produced at the plant at the primary producer level, on an average, the loss is 90%. Because what happens is the organisms use a lot of energy for their own maintaining the body temperatures. Some of them are called homeotherms. Some of them are homeotherms require a lot of energy, and up to 9. Some of the homeotherms require 98% energy for themselves. So they're able to release only another balance 2%. So on an average, considering the diversity of organisms, scientists have said that the energy loss is 90% at every stage. So if 10,000 kilocalories is produced by the primary producer plants, it could be plants at the terrestrial level. It could be the phytoplankton at the aquatic or marine level. And so the 10,000 kilocalories get converted to 1,000 kilocalories at the herbivore level, converted to 100 kilocalories at the primary carnivore level, and 10 kilocalories at the secondary carnivore level. So which means that at the upper levels, the availability of energy is less compared to what is being produced by the plant. No, so this is the energy transfer. So really the ecosystem is, and it can also be called as an exchange, or a place where energy is exchanged. And after this, you also, when we talked about the nutrients, the plant gets the nutrient, the plant, the cyanobacteria, the algae, these are the nutrient formation for the and the plants form the nutrients. Now, at the higher level, the secondary carnivores eat the primary carnivores and get the nutrients. The primary carnivores eat the herbivores, the deer and the cow, and get the nutrients. So the nutrient exchange happens through different ways. They call it filter feeding, when you have suspended particles in the water where the fish get the nutrients, or the earthworms get from suspended particles on the earth, or the bulk feeding where the carnivores eat another animal. So that's how the nutrients get transferred. So it's a very beautiful, this is self-regulated mechanism which is really seen on the earth. The ecosystem has got two broad functions. One is provision of food and energy and nutrients, which I have talked about. But there's also another major category of function called the regulatory services. And the regulatory services include, they provide the resistance to invasion by exotic plants, by pathogens, by pests, and prevent viral infections. And plant species also help to sequester the carbon. That means separate out the carbon dioxide, and that happens if you have more diverse plant communities. And finally, nutrient mineralization. That means the inorganic content in the soil, and the organic content of the soil is also enhanced because of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem has got two broad functions. One is the provisioning, which is provisioning of food, energy, and nutrients. And secondly is regulating the environment.
SM, from what you're saying, if one link from the nature's chain is broken, another link will get broken, and it may lead to the whole chain being broken piece by piece. Surely there must be some control mechanism. Can you elaborate on that?
That's a good question, because you see, actually there are two theories to it, two dominant theories: the bottom-up theory and the top-down theory. So the bottom-up theory is the plants are the ones who are producing the primary energy, and if you have more, that means if there are more algae and more bacteria and more conversion of light energy to chemical energy, a lot of energy is available. And then there is the herbivores start eating it, so they get fatter, the tissue building becomes more, the reproduction becomes more, and there's more energy available to be transferred. So the primary driver of energy and nutrients at the lowest level is the plant. The plant are the primary producers. And then the nutrients. So at the higher level is the predators. If the predators eat more of the secondary carnivores or the primary carnivores, then less of them. So there's less demand on the plant. So ultimately, it's a question of demand and supply. So the plant can create the demand, and the predators, by eating the animals at the lower level, can reduce the demand for the plant. So it's a very self-regulated mechanism, and both theories are dominant and both work, and that's why nature is in equilibrium.
So biodiversity provides us food, energy, and nutrients, and act as a deterrent for the impact of climate change and soil. Which are the countries endowed with good biodiversity?
The globe is extremely biodiverse. There was a survey conducted by the agency called Mongabe, and they did it over about 50 countries, and they tried to measure the biodiversity in terms of 6 parameters. Really, the vascular plants. Vascular plants are those plants which conduct nutrients and water, and then mammals, amphibians, reptiles, birds, list. So across these 6 parameters, they found, and they classified them. They did a weighted average index. They calculated what is the estimated population of the species in the globe, and what are the species of proportional species available in that particular country. When they did the survey, in the top 11 countries, because the 10th place was tied jointly between USA and Venezuela. The top 11 countries, 5 countries are from South America, which is Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. There are 3 from Asia, China, India, and Indonesia. 2 from North America, Mexico and USA, and 1 is Australia. Surprisingly, Africa and Europe are not there in this list. Now, Brazil is the most biodiverse country in the world. The weighted average index they found was 0.772 for Brazil. The next one, Indonesia, was 0.614. And by the time you come to Venezuela, it falls down much lower to about 0.4. And the lowest in the 50th ranked country is about 0.16. So Brazil is far ahead, because Brazil has got those brilliant rain-fed Amazon forests. It is number 1 on mammals, number 2 on amphibians, and number 3 on reptiles and birds. The USA has got a good marine and aquatic population. Colombia is very high on birds. It's got the highest bird species, about 1826 bird species. Indonesia has got the 3rd largest rain-fed forest. It is also good in birds and bird species. China is strong in reptiles and birds. India is strong in reptiles, birds, and also megafauna. India is strong with lions and tigers and rhinoceros. And also we have a Great Barrier Reef. So this is how it has been diverse. So these are the top 10, 11 countries, but Brazil is far ahead of the other countries. But it's good from an Indian point of view. India, the land area of India is only 2.4% of the global area, but we have 8.1% of the global species.
If we can know for sure the impact of loss of biodiversity, then it would help us in managing the risk. Is it so? Is it not, Prasanna?
The biodiversity has got a number of impacts. The first one is the production of biomass. And the biomass is the quantity of all these organic matter, including the organisms. So if you lose biodiversity, the production of biomass and nutrients is reduced. The second thing is the stability. When it says stability is temporal stability over a period of time. Over a period of time, we must have some a quantity of resource capture for the living organisms to be more or less the same. It should not be large-scale fluctuations like a share market. So the stability of ecosystem is affected with the loss of biodiversity. Third is, if there's a change, the change happens. The small changes in the beginning, but the changes with loss of biodiversity, the changes are very great in future. There are certain key species which influence the productivity, because all the productivity is not the same for all the species. Certain species have got higher productivity. So so they have a large influence. This is what research has shown. So that all species don't have the same this thing. And then the functional traits. The functional traits are important. We talk about functional traits for human beings in terms of being anger, resilience, being peaceful, etc.
So if we have to minimize the impact due to loss of biodiversity, what really are the main causes that we have to address?
Oh, the causes are there are many causes. In fact, there are a lot of natural causes, but some of the major human-induced causes are, one is the loss of habitat. When I say loss of habitat, we are forcing the flora or the flora especially to move from one place to another. And this chart, if you look at how humans have dominated the earth, if you look at it on the one end of the spectrum, you have Antarctica, which is 100% undisturbed and 0% human dominated. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Europe, which is almost 65% human dominated and only 15% is undisturbed. And you have Asia and Africa, America, which is anything between 43 to about 60% undisturbed. So which means, to the extent possible, you must leave the region undisturbed. Then you have more scope for the flora and fauna to flourish. But if humans start dominating, the flora and fauna will gradually be extinct, or they will move from one place to another place. Okay. The second reason really is what we call as invasive species. You have a certain population of flora or fauna in one place, you get another exotic species, and that attacks the existing species. The famous case when the migrants first went to Australia, they took with them foxes and rabbits. And this, for foxes, rabbits, and cats, they really decimated the wildlife population in Australia. So that was, you might say, a very deliberate way of doing it. But accidentally, you have weeds and pests and insects, which also affect the existing population. You have knockout effects. Knockout effects are co-evolved species. When I say co-evolved, there are species which grow together. Need not be from the same breed. It could be a species of a plant which is related to a tree which is related to an elephant, for instance. There's this famous case called the Maobi tree in Africa. The Maobi tree has got certain seeds called the karité seeds. And what happens is the elephant takes some of the produce of the Maobi tree, and then it eats part of it and then distributes the seeds across the ground. But what has happened in recent years is that the loss of population of elephants in Ivory Coast and Ghana, so which has resulted in Maobi tree, the growth of Maobi trees reducing because there are no seeds for reproduction. The last passenger pigeon, which died in 1990, along with that, certain lice species parasites also died with it. The fourth one, which humans are so very important, is this illegal hunting, illegal poaching, the wood cutting, systematic wood cutting, intensive agriculture. We keep producing the same type product, whether it's rice or wheat in one place for seasons together. All this becomes, there's a loss of biodiversity. Homogenization. The homogenization, again, is, we have about 7,000 plant species in the world, and 30 of them are contributing to 90% of the production, which means the others are not contributing to any production at all. And it's just like if you say for a human being, if you don't use your limbs, gradually you'll not be able to walk. So if you're not using some of those plant species, they gradually become extinct, they are dying. Take examples, only less than 20% of potato or banana species are being used. So which means the others are going to get extinct. The 5 major causes that I have discussed are really what I would call as the generic causes. But apart from this, there are other causes which I would call the induced causes. And these causes are induced by the adverse impacts in other spheres. Now, as we said, we have these 4 spheres. So the other spheres, the adverse impacts of the other spheres also affects the biodiversity. So the first thing is climate change. Now, with climate change, you have rising temperatures. Rising temperatures lead to wildfires, drought, pest invasion. In fact, if you recently in France, just last week or this week, at the temperature of 40 degrees, they have wildfires. So this destroys the crops, and it affects the crops and the plant life. And then the resistance to pests also goes down. Because of rise in temperature, there's a habitat loss, and habitat loss affects species. So consequently, the species get lost. So that is from the climate change. Now, you must remember that it's not that only the climate change affects loss of biodiversity. Because of loss of biodiversity, there's a reverse effect on the climate. So because of loss of biodiversity, plant life goes away, then the ability to absorb greenhouse gases goes down. So that's the reverse. So both these are interconnected. Similarly, when you come to soil degradation and erosion, there are two broad impacts. One is the loss of fertile land, and then you have clogging and sedimentation of waterways. Now, what happens? The soil, you must remember, is a complex web of microorganisms and macroorganisms which we can't see. There are millions of species under the soil. We know so much about climate change, what's happening in the climate, but we have very little knowledge of what's going below the soil. So the habitats for all these microscopic fungi, bacteria, insects get lost. Also for the macroscopic ants and the earthworms. So then what happens is the breakdown of organic matter goes down, the nutrient in the soil goes down, there's reduced energy flow, and with sedimentation in the waterways, there's decline of fish species. Now, recently, a study was conducted in Karnataka, and they did it in 10 districts, and they found that earthworm population, by proper measures, the earthworm population had increased in 72% of those, or 72% of those 10 districts, or about 70%, you can say. They surveyed about 72% of the 100 farmers, and about 72% said that the earthworm population has increased, and that had beneficial effect on the soil. So this tells us that soil, that the loss of biodiversity affects the soil. So, and which means this, and both are inverse and reverse. The soil affects the loss of biodiversity, and biodiversity also affects the soil. And then we come to ocean acidification. As Suresh, you rightly said, it displaces coral reefs. Now, coral reefs are something like the tree structures. They house and feed fish and marine life. And if the coral reefs go away, we really have loss of marine species. And mind you, the coral reefs absorb 33% of carbon dioxide, and they generate approximately 50% of the oxygen on Earth. And that's a tall, need for the planet. And finally, when we come to freshwater, there's a problem of quality and also quantity. There's a quality deficit and quantity deficit. And because of this, there's the habitat, the fragmentation of the habitat, there is dwindling of fish. And when the human-induced activity of putting dams, it diverts water. It diverts the migration routes for fish. And fish require, the different feeding grounds, different spawning grounds, and all that gets affected. So these are the ways in which the biodiversity is affected by climate, by soil degradation, by ocean acidification, and by freshwater. And mind you, it is just not a one-way traffic, it is the reverse. And as I said, each of these are connected. While ending this discussion, I must talk about the honeybee. The honeybee is really required for us in pollination. They say about 35% of all the agricultural land, a lot of the growth of fruits and trees is because of pollination from the honeybee. Honeybee population in India especially is going down. There's a lot of killing of honeybees. Einstein had once famously said that if honeybees are extinct from the face of the earth, humans will not survive for more than 4 years. That 4 years might be an overstatement. Maybe 4 years is 100 years. But that tells us how the human-induced loss of biodiversity could affect the world. So humans have really caused this loss of biodiversity, and we should be ashamed of this. For Suresh, if you were the king of the hydrosphere, and our colleagues Hiran Vedam and Mukund were the queen and king of the atmosphere and the geosphere, and if I am leading the biosphere, all of you will be pouncing on me and say, we are giving you sunlight, we are giving you rain, we are giving you water, we are giving you plants for production, trees, and yet, what are you giving back? You're only contaminating the whole process. You're only contaminating soil, you're contaminating water. And what is this up to? And my colleagues in the biosphere, the animals and the plants will pounce. They have no voice. Unfortunately, they don't have voice. So really, it's one has to, if you're leading the biosphere, one has to really hang one's head in shame. And, that could be a thought for what we should do in future. So having discussed having presented the major contributors of climate change, of the soil degradation, of ocean acidification and loss of biodiversity, the next episode will be focused on energy. Energy is one of the key sectors which impacts climate change. And the next 2 episodes will be on energy. And with this, my colleague and Suresh and myself have great pleasure in signing off for the day. Au revoir.
Thank you.